The voicemail blinked silently on Cala's phone screen, a red dot pulsing in a sterile corner of the hospital room. She didn't reach for it right away. Snow drifted down beyond the tall window, blanketing the world in silence. When she finally played the message, her mother's voice emerged, syrupy and soft, like warm tea poured over rusted nails. "You've always been my strongest girl," Alora said, the words drawn out in a practiced tenderness that sounded more rehearsed than real. Cala's jaw remained still. Not a twitch of recognition passed her face. "I know things have been complicated, but I've always done what I thought was best." A beep. Then nothing. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the slow drip of saline in the floor across the room. Some people weaponize warmth. Make it a leash. Cala stood, crossed to the window, and watched the snow fall in a hush that mirrored her thoughts. Outside, the world looked clean. But snow can bury more than it softens. Age 8. The porch door clicked shut behind her. Cala stood in thin socks, a woolen coat 2 sizes too big slipping from her shoulders. The cold wasn't biting yet. It was crawling, under the cuffs, up her spine. She turned to knock, but the porch light flicked off. Footsteps crunched behind her. Dorian, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning checkboxes. "It's just for the study," he murmured, not looking at her. Cala blinked. "What study?" He didn't answer. Inside the house, Alora waved to the neighbors, her smile full and blameless. Behind the lattice fence, Cala's breath came in visible clouds. She clutched her elbows and counted. 1, 2, 3. They called it a study, her older voice whispered in the recesses of memory. "I called it the beginning. You need to learn how to survive when no one's coming," Alora had said once, as if delivering a bedtime story. Cala stared back at her across the dinner table. Her fingers numb from the hours she'd spent outside that afternoon. No one asked if she was okay. Dorian muttered, "It builds character," between bites of beef stew. Reeve and Sable looked down at their plates. That silence became its own kind of cold. At night, the house didn't creak, it held its breath. The heater in Cala's room was often missing, borrowed by Sable with a mumbled apology and averted eyes. The apologies stung more than the wind. By 9, Cala passed out once. They told the ER it was low blood sugar. She knew better. In a tiny spiral notebook, she started to write. Not feelings. Just facts. Woke up with frostbite on fingers. Not serious. No one noticed. She asked to stop. "I didn't raise a quitter," Alora said. Her voice was velvet covering steel. It wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. One evening, Tomas from next door handed her a steaming mug through the fence. Cocoa. Marshmallows melting at the rim. Cala held it, warming her hands. But she didn't drink. She didn't trust it. Didn't trust warmth when it came without a price tag. After that, she stopped asking. She watched instead. Memorized patterns. Learned to read the room the way others read the weather. If cold was the only language spoken, she once wrote, I would learn to speak it better than anyone. And she did. Every shut door. Every polite smile. Every moment of silence disguised as patience. Some called her distant. She called it armor. The first night she slept outside was the first time she stopped dreaming. Have you ever been praised for surviving something no child should have gone through? The porch wasn't meant for sleeping. It was barely enclosed, a screened cage on the side of the house that caught every gust of Midwest winter like a net made of wire and frost. That night, Calla stood barefoot on the wooden floor, still damp from snowmelt tracked in from the afternoon. Her arms wrapped around herself, trembling. Alora's voice drifted from behind the closed door, too casual for the situation. It's not punishment. It's a resilience test. Calla's breath hitched. Please. I'll do anything. Just don't. Manipulation won't work on me, sweetheart. The words were muffled but sharp. Snow can't kill you. Weakness will. The bolt slid into place. Dorian passed behind Alora, coffee in hand, not sparing Calla a glance. He didn't need to say anything. His silence was a language all its own. She banged on the glass. Mom! It's too cold. Please! From the hallway, Reeves' shadow moved toward the light switch. It clicked off, plunging the porch into darkness. The sound of his socks on the wood floor as he walked away echoed louder than the wind. Calla slid down against the wall. The screened panels groaned against the wind. One blanket. One pillow. And a pair of socks with holes in the heels. She didn't cry. Not yet. The next morning, her toes wouldn't move. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. The porch door opened only when the sun was fully up. Alora stood there, frowning as if Calla were late for something. What happened to your ankle? She asked flatly. I don't know. It's fine. I'll tell the school you tripped. At school, the nurse examined her foot. Frostbite or poor circulation, she muttered. You need to stay warm, honey. Sable arrived to pick her up with a smile too wide to be real. She just fell. She's clumsy sometimes. At dinner, Reeve was already irritated. You need to stop drawing attention. You make people think we're not taking care of you. No one asked what happened. No one looked at her feet. That night, Calla sat outside again. From the porch, she could see into the warm kitchen. Alora laughed as Ivy babbled nonsense from her high chair. The toddler smacked her hands against the tray, covered in mashed peas. Alora cooed, my sweet baby girl, her voice syrupy and maternal. Calla pressed her cheek to the cold window. She saw Sable glance her way, hesitate, then close the curtain. The next morning, Dorian handed her a thick paperback without looking up from his phone. Learn from this instead of whining. She took it without speaking. The cover read, Survival Through Self-Control. She devoured it. Calla created routines. Coping turned to ritual. Every night, she recited the capitals of all 50 states. Counted her breaths to 300. Whispered multiplication tables. Anything to dull the cold. When the counting didn't work, she hummed. Not a song, just noise. A vibration to keep her tethered. Sometimes, she'd carve letters into the wood with her fingernail. One night, she wrote, Still here. A neighbor's porch light flickered across the street. Someone watched her once. Then the curtain shifted, and the light went off. She wasn't invisible. Just easier to ignore. Children are not resilient, she'd read in that book. They adapt to survive. She stopped begging. Stopped knocking. One night, she started journaling on the backs of old letters she found in the recycling bin. Tucked them under the loose porch board. She never used Dear Diary. She used headings. Observations. Notes. Like experiments. Outside, 19 degrees Fahrenheit. Duration, 6 hours. Symptoms, numbness, nausea. Conclusion, try doubling socks. Ivy's eyes watched from the curtain slit. Calla pretended not to see her. Inside, laughter. Outside, frost forming on the tips of her hair. The cold didn't stop my heart. It froze it long enough for me to rewire it. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home, and worse, punished for wanting to be seen? Calla walked home with her books pressed to her chest, a limp in her step that matched the way the cold wind pulled at her coat sleeves. Her left shoe had a hole, and the sock underneath had another. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. Just dull and predictable. Like most things in her life. Reeves' car passed her on the road once, tires crunching over slush. He didn't slow down. Didn't even look her way. At home, Sable barely said 2 words now, always buried in headphones or behind a closed door. But one day, Marcus pulled up next to her in his rusted blue truck. He didn't say hi. Just unlocked the passenger door. She climbed in without a word. The heater was already blasting. When he saw her toes through the worn-out fabric, he didn't comment. He just slid the heat dial to max and kept driving. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was safe. A week later, as she stepped into the car again, he handed her a thermos. She unscrewed the lid. Cocoa. Still warm. She stared at it for a second, then whispered, "Thanks." Marcus nodded once and turned the radio up just enough to fill the air without forcing words. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Some silences are not empty. Some are shelters." Marcus didn't ask questions. But he watched. When he picked her up the next time, he glanced at the bruise on her wrist. The red scrape across her cheekbone. He said nothing. But the next week, Calla was pulled from math class by the school nurse. A health check. She blinked at the clipboard. She hadn't signed anything. Just routine, the nurse said, kneeling to look at her ankle. Calla didn't flinch. Just stared at the corner of the room while the nurse gently probed her foot. "This isn't new," the woman murmured. A few days later, a letter arrived at home, thick envelope, school letterhead. Alora opened it. Smiled. "Oh, they want to schedule something," she said aloud, holding the page like it was an invitation. "I'll handle it." Marcus exhaled in relief. He thought he'd helped. Calla watched her mother fold the paper and set it aside with the junk mail. That night, she found a sticky note taped inside her locker. The handwriting wasn't familiar. Just because they smile doesn't mean they care. She didn't tell anyone. Alora fainted at the PTA meeting. Not dramatically, just enough to fall into a chair and clutch her chest while murmuring something about dizzy spells. People gathered. Staff offered water. By the next day, teachers spoke to Calla more gently. Asked if she was adjusting okay. One even asked if she'd been overwhelmed lately. "She's always been sensitive," Alora said to the principal over the phone. So much on her mind. At home, Dorian pulled Marcus aside. "You're adding tension," he said softly, like it was advice. "She needs stability. Not drama." Marcus didn't argue. But he stopped picking her up. At dinner, Alora beamed. "Reeve was such a help today, clearing the driveway." Reeve smirked. Marcus looked at his plate. Calla stared at the condensation forming on her water glass. That night, she wrote, "Weaponized vulnerability. Learned behavior. Effective." Calla started watching everyone. When Reeve avoided her eyes. When Sable winced at raised voices but never said a word. She documented it all, who flinched, who changed the subject, who smiled too wide. She started using Alora's own tone when responding to criticism. "Thank you," she'd say when scolded. "I'll reflect on that." The first time she said it, Alora blinked in surprise. Calla smiled. She began hiding things. A granola bar behind the heating vent. A travel heat pack taped beneath the floorboard. A sliver of autonomy in a locked house. She whispered at night, lips barely moving beneath the blankets, "I see the game now." If she couldn't break the rules, she would rewrite them. Marcus stopped talking. Stopped showing up. Calla understood. He'd tried. And trying had made things worse. She didn't hate him. But she wrote it down, emotional loss. File under, temporary allies. One day in February, a plain white envelope arrived in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a card. A winter poem. No signature. But she recognized the handwriting, Tomas. She read it 3 times before hiding it beneath her mattress. Then she copied a line into her notebook. "Frost isn't absence. It's a warning." She traced the words with her fingertip until her skin turned red. "No one is coming," she told herself. And that was okay. The rescue wasn't coming from the outside. Sometimes, it's not the scream that echoes, it's the silence after it. Have you ever had someone try to help you and then disappear when it got hard? Would you forgive them? The gym was loud with whistles and sneakers thudding against the floor, but everything muted the moment Calla's knees gave out. 1 second, she was upright, trying to ignore the stinging cold radiating through her thin shoes. The next, she was flat on the wooden court, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and throat. The nurse called it a fainting spell, but when she pulled off Calla's socks and saw the dusky blue along her toes, her expression changed. A clinic visit followed. Calla sat on the crinkled paper of the exam table while a young doctor pressed gently along her foot. He asked routine questions, voice calm, gentle. Then, casually, he asked, "How long has this been happening?" His eyes didn't match his voice. They were searching. Calla blinked. "Just today." He nodded but didn't believe her. She could feel it. But he didn't push. When Alora arrived, her performance was swift. Red-rimmed eyes, grateful smiles. "She's such a quiet one, never complains. I told her not to push herself." The doctor thanked her for being attentive. Alora placed a hand on Calla's shoulder like they shared the same world. Calla sat frozen. She knew the cost of every lie spoken with a smile. That night, the masks came off. "You ran away today," Alora snapped, arms crossed in the kitchen. "I collapsed," Calla answered, voice dull. "You've done this before." Seeking attention, Dorian added, sipping tea like a spectator at a play. Reeve passed through the room without a word. Sable stayed silent, eyes locked on her plate. Calla stood there, watching the illusion fall into place. This wasn't confusion, it was loyalty. Their silence was chosen. Later, under her door, she found a note, "Don't push them." No name. No need. She didn't hesitate. She held it to her nightlight bulb until it blackened and curled. In the bathroom, she pulled off her socks and studied her feet. One patch of skin on her left big toe had stopped responding to touch entirely. It looked like wax. "This is what happens," she whispered, "when you convince someone that pain is their purpose." She stared at her reflection, remembering Alora's words. "Strength is earned in suffering." Now, the phrase made her jaw clench. Fine, she said to herself, eyes unmoving. I'll play cold. She began researching trauma, digging into nerve damage, cold exposure, and emotional detachment. She used a classmate's login to check out books from the library, avoiding any trail. In her journal, she created systems, symbols for behaviors, reactions, times of day. She noticed when Alora's kindness sharpened, when Dorian's passivity meant danger. She recorded it all. She started testing limits. Ignoring chores. Skipping a dinner call. Taking an extra 5 minutes in the shower. Each move deliberate. Each one a whisper, "You don't own all of me." Once, she saw Sable watching from the hallway. No words. Just that unreadable stare. Every little defiance was a new stitch in the armor she was sewing silently, thread by frozen thread. At school, she found sanctuary in the library. Quiet, warm, predictable. She volunteered to shelve books, choosing silence over home. The librarian smiled at her like she mattered. That was enough. She wrote in her journal under the desk, "They made me cold. But I will decide what freezes and what burns." Marcus became a shadow in her memory, present, but unhelpful. Guilt was a luxury she didn't have time for. Sometimes, when the day got too quiet, Tomas's poem echoed in her head, "Not every storm arrives loud." She smiled once at that. Cold wasn't her punishment anymore. It was her weapon. The warmth I needed never came. But I stopped expecting it. That was the real beginning. Have you ever realized someone's apology was just another form of control? When did you stop believing it? The text came on a Friday afternoon. "Jenna, snow's perfect this weekend. Sledding crew meets at 10. You in?" For a long moment, Calla just stared at the message. The idea of saying yes felt dangerous. Warmth always did. But something in her wanted to try. Maybe because she was tired of watching the world through glass. Maybe because she was 15 now, and the cold had taught her everything except how to live. Jenna's house glowed like a postcard. Lights strung along the porch, the smell of cinnamon drifting out the door. Laughter hit her before the heat did. Boots lined up neatly by the mat, pairs belonging to people who were wanted there. For hours, the world outside blurred into motion, sled skimming down white slopes, wind slicing her cheeks, Jenna's bright laughter echoing. For the first time, she forgot what the cold meant. When Jenna handed her cocoa, she smiled. "You sure you're okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Calla said, though her fingers burned where they touched the cup. The warmth almost hurt. Later, sitting by the fire, she glanced at her coat, thin, gray, barely holding shape. The others' coats were heavy, bright, safe. It was a quiet kind of envy, the kind that lived between words. Have you ever let yourself imagine warmth when you knew it was temporary? That thought stayed with her long after the fire died. The car heater hummed on the ride home. Jenna's dad turned the dial higher before anyone asked. The air filled with soft static from the radio, an easy kind of care Calla didn't know how to process. Halfway through the drive, Jenna asked softly, "Why didn't they get you a better coat?" The question hit harder than the cold ever could. When Calla stepped back into her own house, the air was sharp, stale. The heater was off, the rooms darker than usual. She walked quietly past the living room, where Sable leaned against the doorframe, watching her. No words. Just that quiet, learned stillness. In her room, Calla pulled her blanket up to her chin. The fabric felt thin, barely covering the ache in her bones. She wrote in her journal before sleeping, "Warmth without permission is suspicious." Her hand trembled as she closed the book. That night, her phone buzzed. Alora's name flashed on the screen. Video call. When she answered, her mother's face filled the screen, wine glass in one hand, smile too wide. "You've been out a lot lately," she said. "Everything okay at school?" Dorian's voice floated from behind. "We just worry about her priorities." "I'm fine," Calla replied, already bracing for the pivot. Alora's tone softened like silk hiding a blade. "Are your grades slipping? Do I need to talk to your teacher? Maybe cancel that sled thing?" Calla stared at the glow of her own reflection in the screen. "No. Everything's fine." "Sweetheart," Alora said, tilting her head, "I just want what's best for you." Calla smiled faintly. "Then why do I feel unsafe in my own living room?" she wanted to ask, but didn't. Instead, she nodded, the way obedience had been trained into her. When the call ended, the room felt colder than before. Why does warmth always demand an explanation? Instead of retreating, Calla began to plan. She read quietly with headphones on, the soft glow of her laptop hiding open tabs about trauma and recovery. She started writing goals in the corner of her notebook, small, unnoticeable ones. Buy my own coat. Never need to ask again. Every dollar she earned from her part-time job folded neatly into a small envelope under her mattress. The next time she visited Jenna, she slipped into the girl's closet, fingers brushing along thick parkas. She hesitated only once before borrowing one, a size too big, a quiet rebellion that smelled faintly of lavender detergent. "What's the smallest change you made when everything felt out of your control?" She wore that coat like armor. The next weekend, the world looked different. Snow glittered under the pale sun, and Calla stood outside Jenna's house, heavy coat zipped to her chin. For once, she didn't shiver. The others laughed, through snow, built small, melting kingdoms. Calla looked up, watching flakes descend in slow spirals. "Every flake is lit," she thought. "See me now." Her phone buzzed. Alora's name filled the screen. Calla stared at it, unmoving, the wind catching her breath. She didn't answer. The phone kept buzzing in her pocket while the snow kept falling, soft and endless, like applause that wasn't for her, but finally, she didn't need it to be. "Your request to write Chapter 6 has already been fulfilled. Please let me know if you'd like to proceed to Chapter 7 or make any revisions." Calla walked back from campus under a thick clouded sky, her breath fogging in the chilled air. The wind felt different tonight, like it carried news. At her door, taped to the frame, was a small envelope. Inside, a USB drive. Written in neat block letters across a sticker on the side, "Family Data, Marlowe Research." She hesitated. Inside her apartment, she shut the blinds before inserting the drive into her laptop. Folders bloomed on the screen. Invoices. Scans of consent forms, none signed by her. Emails with subject lines like "Trial Data Shipment Confirmed" and "Marlowe Unit, Sustained Response Confirmed." And then the real blow, line item logs showing subject temperature drops and psychological response logs matched to a name, Calla M. Dorian's digital signature tagged every file. The final page was a payout sheet, corporate compensation routed to a private account in Alora's name. She stared at it. Her jaw clenched, shoulders rigid. They made a profit from the nights I prayed for warmth. The snow outside fluttered softly, mockingly. Have you ever found out someone you trusted was benefiting from your pain? The laptop screen cast a pale glow. She closed the lid slowly, whispering, "No more secrets." She arranged the meeting under a neutral pretense, interview for coursework. Dr. Nathan Frost accepted. They met in a quiet campus conference room, two plastic chairs facing each other, a table between them. Calla opened with politeness, but directness. I'm researching institutional trauma. I believe you directed a behavioral program with ties to youth endurance testing. Frost sighed, his posture too calm. You must be Alora's daughter. The silence pulsed. He looked down, laced his fingers together. I remember her. Very sharp. Very driven. Did she ever say I wasn't normal? Calla asked. Frost didn't hesitate. She once said, our daughter doesn't feel pain like you think, she survives. The words shattered the barrier inside Calla. Her grip tightened on the edge of the chair. Did you know she was falsifying consent? I suspected. But no one challenges Alora unless they're ready to pay for it. She stood, shaking. I am. Frost swallowed. I'll speak. But if we go public, it has to be clean. Documented. Strategic. She stepped toward the door. It wasn't just abandonment. It was architecture. Frost stood slowly. You deserve the truth. And so do others. She turned. Then help me build it. Tears hit her cheeks as she stepped outside, but they didn't sting, they steamed. She wasn't crying from fear anymore. She stormed into her apartment, bypassing her coat hook, and went straight to the shelf of journals. Pages of pain. Nights of isolation. She threw them in the trash, one by one. The past no longer deserved spine or ink. At her desk, she opened a new document, Marlowe Case, Phase 1. She outlined 3 points: legal review, media outreach, survivor panel. She texted Ivy, we begin Monday. Cold is no longer passive. Do you hold on to old pain, or burn the bridge and build a new one? Calla pressed save, then stared at the screen for a long moment. Rage was no longer loud, it had form now. A blade made from ice. Back in Colorado, Alora stood at the head of the dining room table, surrounded by crystal glasses and curated tension. Dorian sat beside her, fingers steepled. Reeve arrived late, Sable earlier, both pretending this wasn't a war council. We need to get ahead of the narrative, Alora said. Maybe a joint statement, Dorian added. Support her education, frame it as growth. Reeve's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, metadata ping. He swallowed hard. Sable broke the silence. She hasn't answered my texts. She's preparing, Alora said, her voice clipped. We need unity. Miles away, Calla watched it all via a private live stream feed from the dining room smart panel. Her laptop sat open, her face illuminated by the scene playing out. She didn't flinch. They're writing the press release while I'm writing the indictment. Ivy and Calla met over encrypted video. Micah Trask joined moments later, face tense, eyes determined. Everyone here has seen the memo? Calla asked. Nods. Then we begin. First public panel on coercive family systems. Coincided with document release. Ivy added, we'll reach out to the university paper. Start local. Go wide after the first spark. Micah leaned forward. Are we sure this is safe? Calla's voice didn't waver. It never was. But it's right. They moved through the agenda like a tactical team. Calla quoted a paper from her seminar, Control is not power. Relinquishment is. She thought of Tomasa's words, storms pass, but the landscape remembers. In her new journal, she wrote one line, this isn't revenge. It's restoration. When was the moment you decided your story belonged to you? The final task, uploading the first packet of documents for public release. Calla clicked upload. They invited a dinner. I accepted the subpoena. Calla was halfway through her study notes when her phone rang, Sable's voice sharp on the other end. Alora collapsed at the hospital. You should come. No details. No hesitation. Just an address and the assumption she would obey. She knew better. Still, she drove through the storm, snow pelting the windshield like ice-thrown lies. Each mile closer, the knot in her chest tightened. The hospital loomed, sterile lights bleeding into the blizzard. Calla parked crooked, grabbed her bag, walked in. The lobby was staged. Alora lay sprawled across a bench, one hand draped dramatically over her side, nurses clucking around her. Phones were out. Janet, a longtime nurse who'd seen too much, met Calla's eyes across the hallway. Hesitation flickered. She fainted when she heard you were coming, Sable whispered, too loudly. Calla didn't move. She staged the faint so everyone else would feel sorry for her while I would look guilty. Have you ever walked into a situation that others staged just to control how you'd feel? Calla exhaled slowly, not from concern but calculation. She turned without a word and walked back out into the snow. Dinner was set like a holiday spread, china gleaming, silverware exact, candles flickering like illusions. The Marlowe estate hadn't changed. That was the point. Dorian stood as Calla entered, smiling like a politician caught mid-spin. We're glad you're here. Family should talk face to face. Alora, upright and vibrant, said nothing of the hospital. We wanted to talk about you, Calla, and what your next step should be. Her voice was honey, thick and false. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, cheeks flushed. He sat beside Calla and muttered under breath, she said she'd file a negligence report against me if you walked out again. Reeve and Sable sat in silence, faces carved from discomfort. Dorian leaned forward like a chess player calculating his checkmate. Calla realized then, this wasn't a dinner. It was an ambush dressed in linen. They thought they'd caught me in their cold grip. They haven't yet felt mine. Calla stood. Excuse me. Just some air. Outside, her breath fogged fast. She dug the laptop from her car, balanced it on the dashboard, fingers frozen but deliberate. She sent the archive draft to her lawyer. Then to Ivy. A text to Marcus, you're part of this now. She watched his reaction from the rearview mirror as the message reached his phone inside. He froze mid-sentence, blinking like someone slapped. Power doesn't surrender, it must be taken. Calla returned to her seat, slow and calm. No emotion. Just precision. They didn't see it, but she had already left the game. Sometimes the boldest move isn't screaming, it's logging out and walking out. Dorian raised his glass. To family. Everyone echoed, except Calla. She lifted hers but didn't drink. Alora looked over, soft smile weaponized. We love you, Calla. You just need to trust your parents again. Calla set the glass down gently. I'm not asking for your trust, she said. I'm asking for accountability. The room froze. The only sound was the slow tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Reeve shifted uncomfortably. Sable didn't move, just watched the fire like it held the only truth. They traded my nights of shiver for their days of comfort. It ends here. Calla walked out into the cold. Her boots crunched against the snow-packed driveway. Behind her, frosted glass glowed golden, Alora's figure just visible through it, face unchanged, pose composed. Calla didn't flinch. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Notification, Media Watchdog Group, confirmed. We're live in 24 hours. They issued an invitation. I sent a subpoena. The house was still. A hush too practiced. Callum moved like a shadow, her duffel already half-packed under the bed. She didn't flip the lights, her fingers knew the zippers, the drawer that creaked. Outside her window, snowflakes drifted in solemn rhythm, caught in the dim spill of moonlight. She didn't leave a note. The clock glowed 11:57 p.m. Keys in hand, she stepped past the family photos on the hallway wall, every one of them smiling, frozen, false. The door clicked behind her. No one stirred. Her car coughed in protest, but it started. She drove. Southbound through wind and ice, heater on full blast. For once, warmth came not from them but from herself. They can't detain me with apologies. Have you ever left without telling anyone, just so you could stop asking permission? The blizzard swallowed the road ahead. Her phone buzzed, Marcus's last message. Just call if you need me. She didn't. She drove faster. The gated entrance to Alpine Haven was nearly invisible behind snow-caked hedges. She checked in under a false pretense, family visitor for Elora Marlowe. The staff nodded, indifferent. The lie sat on her tongue like stone, but it held. This was not her arrival, it was her reversal. An alert pinged her phone. She didn't have to open it. She knew. Elora's letter had gone public. My daughter abandoned me to live off my generosity, it read. Calla watched the headlines spread. She didn't blink. In her glove compartment, the notebook's label had changed, evidence. She whispered to herself, she traded my freedom for a story. So I turned mine into the proof. The sign creaked in the wind as she passed it, Alpine Haven Senior Care. She didn't look back. Reeves' call came in. She let it ring. Voicemail, we're worried. Please come home. She hit record. Not for memory. For testimony. She kept driving. A winding road took her higher, where snow blew sideways and headlights meant nothing. At a lonely overlook, she stopped the car. Got out. The world below glowed faint with scattered lights. Guilt is the last firewall of control. She let it melt into the wind. What guilt were you carrying that someone else built for you? The cabin waited. Booked weeks ago. Paid in cash. No one knew. Inside, it was bare but enough. She locked the door, rolled out her charger, set her laptop on the kitchen table. Satellite connected. Secure server ready. She uploaded everything, voicemails, USB scans, emails. The drive clicked with the final file, Operation, Chill turned around. The coat she wore was thick. Heavy. Chosen by her, for her. She set her social profiles to auto-reply, I will respond when the facts are ready. I'm not running from them, I'm running toward proof. Dawn broke clean and cruel. She stood at the window, coffee warming her hands. Trees shimmered under ice-crust snow. Her phone buzzed. Ivy. Text, they know you're there. Calla turned off her laptop. The wind howled once, then stilled. She smiled, eyes steady. They issued the press release. I sent the first broadcast. The headline ran like frost across the screen, Marlowe daughter abandons her mother. Below it, a polished photo of Elora with a soft blanket draped over her shoulders, eyes wet but dignified. Sable's byline sat in bold beneath. Calla clicked play. The narration was slick, soft-spoken, and laced with implication. She left in the night, the anchor said, pursuing what some call a cold ambition. Calla paused at mid-sentence, her cabin silence save for the wind tapping the window. She noted each edit, the way her silence had been weaponized, her absence shaped into abandonment. They knew how to break me in headlines before I even spoke. She scribbled notes for her own broadcast, phrases, tactics, their omissions. Then she stared into the camera on her laptop. Would you trust a headline about you if you didn't get to read it first? She knew her audience now. Older. Wiser. Many had seen their stories rewritten by someone else's convenience. That evening, Calla live-streamed a segment of the article to the Survivor forum. She added subtitles herself, pausing to clarify the tone behind each phrase. She posted a screenshot of Alora's signature on the corporate memo, redacted, but clear. While she played victim, I built the case. Then came the twist. Alora appeared live on television, promoting child welfare and emotional resilience, smiling like the world hadn't cracked. An investigative journalist, already briefed by Calla, caught her off guard. How do you justify using your daughter as a research subject? Alora's eyes twitched. That's a private family matter. Calla didn't flinch watching. She clipped the moment, added the caption, "Privacy is not immunity." When were you forced to be the headline instead of the author of your own story? Dorian was the next to fall in the crosshairs. Calla's attorney sent a discovery notice. The Marlowe survival study was now under official review. He froze in his office, clutching his phone. Reeve, meanwhile, faced silence from the community, once chummy neighbors dodging him in the grocery aisles, teen parents avoiding his gaze at basketball games. Sable posted a vague apology online, but it fizzled quickly. Calla saved Reeve's voicemail, "Call when you're ready to talk like a real sister." She archived it under, "Gaslight, emotional obligation." They put my name on the front page so they could stay in the background. She circled the date on her calendar. The day she would go public. What's the heaviest secret you carried so those around you could stay comfortable? The night of the stream, she didn't script it. She wore the coat. Her hair was up. Her voice was steady. For years, she said, I survived nights colder than any headline. But survival wasn't the end of it. She showed the documents. The voices of other survivors. She let the screen flicker with proof, voice recordings, timestamps, emails. Some audience members cried. Others sat in stunned silence. Alora watched it from the Marlowe living room. Tears ran down her cheeks, but there was no relief in them. Just exposure. Dorian's chair remained empty. Cold used to define me. Now it defines justice. If you had one chance to press play on your truth for the world, what would you show them? As the stream ended, a single message blinked into her inbox. Board meeting starts Monday, you're on the agenda. She closed the laptop, stood up, and opened the cabin door. The snow was falling softly now. The air was clean, and she let it fill her lungs. They scheduled the hearing. I set the agenda. The morning of the hearing started quiet, too quiet. The kind that presses on your chest before anything's even said. I zipped my coat, grabbed the folder labeled Institutional Endurance Study, and stepped out into the Colorado cold. It didn't sting anymore. It just reminded me I was awake. The boardroom was warmer than expected. That felt wrong. Ivy nodded at me from across the long oak table, her fingers tight around a pen. Micah sat beside her, jaw set. Dorian wasn't in the room yet. Alora, of course, wouldn't show, too fragile for public confrontation, apparently. But her signature was on every page in my folder. A woman in a navy blazer called the meeting to order. We are here to evaluate the ethical conduct and oversight of the Marlowe Family Trust and its associated programs. Dorian entered 10 minutes late, straightening his collar like it mattered. He didn't look at me. I didn't look away. They asked questions. I gave facts. Calmly. Precisely. I spoke of cold exposure tests disguised as resilience training, of falsified wellness reports, of silent dinners that stretched for hours while I sat outside on the porch in snow-wet socks. When I played the audio clip, Alora saying, "Calla doesn't feel pain like other kids. She adapts," there was silence. Ivy pressed the playback again. Louder. Slower. No one blinked. A board member shifted in her seat. "Do you believe your parents knowingly placed you in harm?" "I believe they calculated it," I said. "They called it character building. But what they built was a research model. And a scapegoat." Viewer interaction. Have you ever realized the people who taught you strength were really testing your limits for their gain? Dorian's defense was polished. All parenting involves trial. We tried our best. I cut him off. "You logged my frostbite recovery times in a spreadsheet. That's not parenting." The hearing lasted 2 hours. When it ended, I didn't wait for the decision. I left the room, stepped into the snow, and breathed in. My breath didn't shake. Back at the cabin, I stood by the wood stove. Tomas had once told me, the real verdict doesn't come from a gavel, it comes from what you do next. So I lit the stove. I made tea. I opened my laptop and began outlining a foundation for survivors of familial psychological coercion. Viewer interaction. What would you build if the truth no longer burned you, but warmed you instead? A new message pinged on my screen. It was from a National Trauma Education Coalition. "We saw your testimony. Can we feature your story?" I looked out at the white forest and didn't answer yet. Some things deserve a moment of silence before the next beginning. The call came just after lunch, a soft voice from Alpine Haven's front desk. "There's a resident here, Mrs. Talbot. She said she recognized you from when you were little. Said she saw you out in the snow." Calla didn't speak at first. The air around her cabin was still, the last breath of winter holding its place. She pulled the laptop closer, opened the facility's live feed. Mrs. Talbot, in her wool cardigan, sat among a semicircle of silver-haired residents and said clear as sunlight, "That girl Calla. I saw her out there alone in that yard. More than once. Her mama said it was part of training. But a child needs heat, not a lesson." Alora sat across from her, frozen. Her chin trembled. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then came the crack, one tear, then another. Calla hit record. No filters. No edits. No voiceover. I didn't need her to regret me. I needed her to face it. Have you ever heard someone else say the sentence you couldn't? Healing isn't a restart, it's a rewrite. By the time she reached her cabin, the woods were whispering with spring. Snow clung to the pine branches, but beneath them, the ground began to darken with thaw. She stepped inside, smelling pine and ash, then dropped her bag near the hearth. She installed the last tile around the new wood stove herself, hands rough but steady. The fire lit slowly, then caught. No one else lit it for her. She did. She pulled out a box of old journals from her first year back, many written in a shaky hand, some stained by melted snow or tears. She read them, one by one. When she was done, she fed the worst pages to the flames. The rest, she kept. She didn't look at the freezer in the corner. She wasn't tethered to its hum anymore. You built warmth where none existed, Tomas said on video chat. No, Calla replied. I discovered it in me. What was the thing you built when others said you couldn't? She opened the folder titled Archive, Final Cut. It was ready: survivors' testimonials, legal notes, family statements, the quiet truths no one had dared to document until now. At the top of the page she typed, family name guarantee, no longer self-inflicted. The live stream panel was scheduled for Friday. Ivy and Micah had confirmed. Its title glowed in the header, When Home Hunts You. Calla didn't flinch reading it. Toward the end of the panel, she leaned forward slightly and said calmly, I accepted the invitation once. Now I decline with dignity. Click. That was the moment it changed. Her temperature stabilized, not out of cold, but balance. When did you stop being their experiment and start scripting your outcome? She didn't tell anyone she was going to see Alora, not Ivy, not Micah. It wasn't a scene. It was a finish line. She parked in the visitor's lot and stood outside in the silence. The wind carried a chill, but it wasn't biting. She wore her thick coat, zipped high, her breath even. She didn't walk inside. Through the glass, Alora sat by a table, knitting something small. Her hands paused. She looked up. Their eyes met. No words. Calla gave a small nod. Not approval. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. She turned to leave. In front of the entryway, she placed a small portable heater, brand new, still in the box. No card. No note. A gift without expectation. She got in her car, shut the door, and pulled away. The rearview mirror held Alora's face for just a moment more. I gave them the heat they refused me. I don't need their home anymore. Is forgiveness a forever promise, or a doorway you open on your own terms? The snow ended. The horizon began.